But to hear the judge from the bench say that in his 40 years as a judge, he has never seen something so blatantly unconstitutional sets the tone for the seriousness of this effort.
Looks like we all owe Washington a huge thank you for defending the Constitution. And no, I don't mean the swamp rats currently occupying Washington, D.C. The Attorney General of Seattle, Washington has successfully convinced a Reagan-appointed judge, mind you, that Trump's executive order attempting to stop birthright citizenship is completely unconstitutional. Apparently, the most unconstitutional thing the judge has ever seen.
That judge saying, this is blatantly unconstitutional, and then walking out of the court said, it just boggles my mind.
Seeing as there's been a flurry of executive orders over the last couple of days, we'll take a closer look at what he tried to do with this executive order, and then take a look at how the judge slammed it down harder than MJ from the free throw line. But first, if you're enjoying the content here, make sure to like the video and double check that you're subscribed. Here are some details about this horrendous executive order.
Yes, and it's something that I never imagined was an issue because this came up during Trump's first term. We heard sounds of this back then. And when I first heard it, I thought, that's ridiculous. Is there anything more fundamental than the idea that if you're on U.S. soil and you give birth, that child is a U.S. citizen? I started looking into the academia around it, and it's an interesting argument. You look at the language, and by the way, it's not just the Constitution. Federal law also enshrines the same language. Someone born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And that's the magic phrase that people on the right seize upon to say that there is no such thing as birthright citizenship, because they argue that that means that someone who has a child here must also be subject to the jurisdiction. And that means a citizen of the United States or a lawful permanent resident, not somebody who is subject to or a citizen of another country. That's the argument. It's never been specifically tested, although the Supreme Court has come close in a number of cases, most of which go back 100 or more years. And really what this executive order is doing is saying the federal government no longer recognizes this kind of citizenship. So we will no longer issue papers, passports, things that people need. This, not only will this be challenged, it's already been challenged. I'm reading the complaint that was filed last night. So this will be litigated immediately, and we're going to get an answer. If nothing else, we're going to get a constitutional answer to this question that's been kicking around now for about a decade.
And we got that answer. A federal judge said, screw you, Donald Trump. You're not the king, you're not a dictator, and you don't have the power to change the Constitution. This is such a ridiculous argument that legal scholars everywhere are completely flabbergasted.
As the judge called it, it's a blatantly unconstitutional executive order. The president has no power to change the Constitution. He knows that. It's surprising to me that a couple minutes after he took an oath to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States, he decided to issue an unconstitutional EO. But, you know, this is what he promised people he would do. So I guess, you know, the judge had to do the judge's job and issue a TRO. That's how things work in America. We go to the courts and we get them enjoined. And just as a note, the first Trump administration, this was standard practice that he would issue illegal orders and people would have to go into court and get injunctions. So it's just a repeat of the first term.
I guess you can consider all of these illegal executive orders a jobs program, seeing as attorney generals and lawyers and judges across the country have to spend their time and our tax dollars on telling Trump to go eat. Seems like he didn't learn anything from his first term when all of those executive orders were shot down. Instead, it looks like he's getting even more brazen with it. Both the Attorney General of Washington and the judge that shot this down are completely flabbergasted with Trump's attempt to do this.
We are thrilled that the court saw the seriousness and the urgency of the complaints and requests for a temporary restraining order brought by the state of Washington, Oregon, Arizona, and Illinois, and are thrilled that the judge issued a temporary restraining order directing the United States government, the unconstitutional and un-American executive order attempting to eliminate birthright citizenship in America. This is step one, but to hear the judge from the bench say that in his 40 years as a judge, he has never seen something so blatantly unconstitutional sets the tone for the seriousness of this effort. I want to thank all of the men and women who put in hard work over the past year to prepare for something like this and who successfully argued the case today. We have an incredible team of men and women in the Attorney General's office in the state of Washington and working collaboratively with our colleagues across the country. We'll take your questions.
Nick, you heard the argument that you didn't need to do this right now, that this wasn't even going into effect until next month. Why did you need the TRO today before the order actually went into effect?
Well, first and foremost, the judge obviously disagreed with that argument, setting the tone for the urgency. And as our team laid out in court, this order effectively forces states to prepare for the effective date of that order, has an impact now, and more importantly, created a cloud of uncertainty for children being born here and in Seattle, all across Washington, and all across the country. And so the urgency by which we moved was effective and appropriate and supported by the court.
Mr. Attorney General, what difference would it make if the substance of the order were passed by Congress and signed into law by the president?
Well, in order to amend the United States Constitution, there is a pretty well laid out process to do that. And I think what the order today reinforces is that no one individual, not even the President of the United States, can simply erase that amended the United States Constitution. They could certainly take that action. But I also think it's important to remind everyone that this amendment to our Constitution was put into effect in the wake of the most infamous United States Supreme Court decision in American history, the Dred Scott decision. It was put into effect to reaffirm what it means to be an American. And so that's why this case was so important, and that's why we had to act now.
Bless this Attorney General and his legal team for being able to attack this unconstitutional executive order immediately. You heard it from him. Even the Supreme Court is going to have a hard time coming down on Trump's side of this issue. And all of us should see this as an attack on American identity. Being born in this country is fundamental to our citizenship. The Dred Scott decision is what got rid of the 3/5 compromise. And with Trump revoking the Equal Employment Opportunity executive order that was signed by LBJ right after the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It shouldn't be a mystery to anybody what Trump is trying to do here. When he says anti-DEI, he means rolling back protections for women and minorities, as well as anti-discrimination laws. But don't think that this is the end of the fight. Donald Trump might still get his way if this gets to the Supreme Court, or if the absolutely whipped Congress follows along with Trump and tries to remove these laws from the books.
The weight of authority leans toward birthright citizenship, maybe for no other reason than it's the way it's been interpreted for centuries now, and for that reason alone, that reliance interest that everybody has had on that kind of right, whether it exists or not, is a strong factor in deciding whether or not it exists, because it's existed for 100 or so years now. But it's possible that a court, the Supreme Court, with a number of conservative justices, may conclude that subject to the jurisdiction thereof means that someone born on U.S. soil must additionally be born to somebody who is lawfully here. Not necessarily a citizen, lawful permanent resident, but not somebody who is here illegally, in the same way that children of ambassadors do not get birthright citizenship. That would be the argument.
Does it feel like this is part of the goal right here, is that conservatives would like to see what the Supreme Court has to say about this issue?
Absolutely. I think this is something that conservatives think they have a pretty strong argument for. Even the Supreme Court case that they say enshrined birthright citizenship, because it's not only the Constitution, a federal law, and a Supreme Court decision, they say that dealt with the child of lawful permanent residence. So they say it's not even precedential. So this is going to be a really fascinating argument before the Supreme Court. And a lot of folks might be surprised. This might be a right that may have never been a right in the first place.
Honestly, that's pretty scary stuff. Trump's clown show of a Supreme Court might just decide that you or I were never a citizen to begin with. Let's just hope it doesn't get that far. Or if it does, that the Supreme Court comes to their senses. After all, there's only so much stupid that they can defend. I'm Tony Hinderman with Really American, and I'll catch you next time.